Officer James Carter had been on the force for 10 years. He had seen all kinds of things: reckless drivers, stolen cars, and even dangerous criminals. But nothing had ever made his hands shake. Nothing had ever made his heart stop cold. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you are watching from in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on content like this. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's get started. It was a quiet evening. The road was mostly empty. He sat in his patrol car, waiting for something to happen. Then it did. A rusty red sedan sped past a stop sign without slowing down. It wasn't just a small mistake. The car barely hesitated. James's eyes narrowed. He flipped on his sirens and pulled onto the road, his police lights flashing against the darkening sky. The driver didn't stop right away. The car swerved slightly, hesitating for a moment before finally pulling over to the side of the road. James noticed the way the car wobbled, almost like the driver was nervous or unsure about stopping. His instincts tingled. Something wasn't right. James parked behind the sedan, unbuckled his seatbelt, and stepped out. He adjusted his belt. He wasn't expecting trouble, but he had learned long ago never to let his guard down. As he approached the driver's window, he glanced at the license plate. Nothing unusual. The car itself looked old but well maintained, the kind of vehicle that had seen years of wear but was still running. The window rolled down. James leaned in slightly, ready to ask for the driver's license and registration. But then, he froze. His breath caught in his throat. He forgot what he was about to say. The woman sitting in the driver's seat had a tattoo on her wrist. A small black crescent moon with 3 tiny stars above it. James's stomach twisted. That tattoo. He knew that tattoo. His little sister, Lily, had that exact design. It was the one thing she had begged their mother for when she was 5 years old. A temporary tattoo at first, then a real one when she turned 10. She had been so proud of it. She had shown it off to everyone. And then she was gone. 15 years ago. Taken. Vanished without a trace. James had spent years looking for her. He had searched every record, every missing person case, followed every lead. Nothing. No one had seen her. No one had heard from her. And now here she was, sitting in front of him. Or was she? James forced himself to breathe, to think. This woman looked young, mid-20s, maybe. She had wavy brown hair that fell over her shoulders, deep brown eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. She seemed nervous, gripping the steering wheel a little too tight. Could it really be her? Or was this just a terrible, impossible coincidence? His voice came out rough, almost shaky. Where did you get that tattoo? The woman's face paled. Her eyes flickered with something. Fear. Confusion. She hesitated. For just a second, her gaze darted to her wrist, like she had forgotten the tattoo was even there. Then she swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she whispered. I've had it my whole life. The words hit James like a punch to the gut. This can't be real. His little sister had been gone for 15 years. One moment, she was playing in the backyard. The next, she was missing. A child stolen in broad daylight. His family had searched, prayed, begged for answers. Nothing. The case went cold. Now, a woman with the same tattoo, her tattoo, sat in front of him. He had to stay professional. He had to follow protocol. But his mind screamed for answers. Step out of the car, please, he said, his voice tight. She didn't move at first. Her gaze darted to the side mirror, down to her lap, then back at James. Slowly, she reached for the door handle. The way she hesitated made his skin prickle. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something buried. She opened the door and stepped out. James studied her face. There was something there. Something familiar. His pulse pounded in his ears. Could it really be her? The woman shifted uncomfortably under his stare. She crossed her arms, tucking her hands under her elbows like she was trying to make herself smaller. Her breathing was shallow, her shoulders tense. James tried to steady himself. He needed to ask more questions, figure out who she was. But before he could say another word, the woman's expression changed. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. It was as if something clicked inside her. A sudden, terrifying realization. Then, without warning, she turned and bolted. James's heart leaped. "Hey!" She sprinted toward the woods, her feet kicking up gravel as she ran. No hesitation. No second glance. Just raw, desperate escape. James reacted instantly. His training kicked in. He took off after her, his boots pounding against the pavement. She was fast. Faster than he expected. She weaved between the trees, her movements sharp and practiced, like someone who had run for their life before. James pushed harder. Branches whipped past his face. Leaves crunched beneath his feet. He had chased plenty of suspects before, but this was different. This wasn't just about the law. This was personal. "Stop," he called out. "I just want to talk." She didn't listen. She ran like someone who had done this before, dodging trees, leaping over fallen logs. She knew how to move fast, how to disappear. But James had trained for this. He was faster, stronger. He pushed forward, closing the gap. A few more strides, then his hand caught her wrist. She twisted, trying to yank free, but he held on. He spun her around, forcing her to face him. "Let me go," she screamed, her breath ragged. Tears streamed down her face, her body trembling. James held firm, but softened his grip. He wasn't here to hurt her. He just needed answers. "Look at me," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. She struggled for a moment longer, then froze. Her eyes darted to his face. James could see it now. Her nose, her eyes, the shape of her chin. The same features he had seen in the mirror every day. The same features his mother had. His breath caught in his throat. His heart pounded harder. His voice came out in a whisper. "Lily?" The woman's sobs grew stronger. Her shoulders shook. She stared at him, confusion flashing across her face. "No," she whimpered. "That's not my name." James swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "It was your name," he said gently. "Before you were taken." Her body stiffened. Her hands curled into fists. Something flickered in her eyes, like a door cracking open. "No," she muttered again, shaking her head. But her voice trembled. James could see the battle happening inside her. A part of her resisted, but another part, deep inside, seemed to be searching, grasping for something just out of reach. Then suddenly, she gasped. She clutched her head. Her knees buckled. James reached out, steadying her. Her breaths came in sharp, uneven bursts. Flashes of memories hit her. A little boy playing with her in the backyard. A woman singing her to sleep. Laughter. Warmth. Then darkness. Hands grabbing her. A rough voice whispering in her ear. Her body shook violently. She screamed. James held her arms gently, steadying her. "It's okay," he said. "I've been looking for you my whole life." She stared at him, her lips trembling. Tears streamed down her face. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, a gunshot rang through the air. James reacted instantly, pushing her down, shielding her with his body. His heart raced. His ears rang. The shot had come from somewhere close. Someone was out there. A voice echoed through the trees. "You should have let her go." James's blood ran cold. He turned his head slowly. A dark figure stood in the distance, a gun in hand. James tightened his grip on his holster. This wasn't over. James hit the ground, pulling her down with him. His heart pounded as he scanned the darkness. Someone was out there. A shadow moved between the trees. Then, a figure stepped forward. A man in a dark coat, gun raised. His face was lined with scars, his eyes sharp and cold. "No one takes her," the man growled. "She belongs to me." James's jaw clenched. His grip tightened around his own weapon. "She's not yours," James spat. His voice was steady, but his hands burned with rage. The man smirked. "She doesn't even remember who she is. Do you, sweetheart?" James felt the woman beside him tense. He turned his head slightly. She was shaking. Her fingers dug into the dirt. Her breathing was ragged. "Don't listen to him," James said quickly. "He's lying." The man let out a low chuckle. "Lying?" He took a step forward, raising the gun slightly. "She was mine long before you even realized she was missing." James's stomach twisted. How long had this man held her? How much had she suffered? James knew he had only seconds. His training told him to wait, to assess, but his instincts screamed otherwise. The man's finger twitched near the trigger. James moved first. One perfect shot. The man's body jerked. His gun slipped from his grasp, hitting the ground with a dull thud. He staggered back, clutching his chest. A low groan escaped his lips before he collapsed. Then, silence. James kept his gun raised, his breath short. His pulse pounded in his ears. He watched the man's body, waiting for movement. Nothing. The forest stood still. The only sound was the woman's ragged breathing. James exhaled and turned toward her. She was staring at the man, her body frozen. "It's over," James said softly. "You're safe now." She looked at him. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Tears welled in her eyes. James reached out, his fingers brushing against her shoulder. "Let's go home, Lily." She flinched at the name. Her head shook slightly. I don't." James's chest ached. He had found her. She was right here, but the memories, the truth, it was all buried under years of something he couldn't yet understand. She blinked, her breath uneven. Then, slowly, she looked at him again, really looked at him. Something changed in her eyes. A single word slipped from her lips, so quiet he almost didn't hear it. "James." James felt the air rush out of his lungs. His arms wrapped around her as she collapsed against him, sobbing. He held her tight, his own tears finally breaking free. 15 years. 15 years of nightmares, searching, waiting, hoping. And now, she was here. But deep inside, James knew this wasn't the end. The man who had taken her was gone, but the darkness that had stolen her life, that was still out there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more amazing content, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.